Let's conclude in chapter 2, and you might want to mark some of these down in verses 3 and 4, because this was the biggest blessing to me. I spent the most time looking at the provisions of love. And what happens in these two verses is the Shulamite says this in 2, 3, and 4. Chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. Like an apple tree among the trees of the wood, so is my beloved among the sons. I sat down in his shade with great delight, and his fruit was sweet to my taste. He brought me to the banqueting table, and his banner over me was love. Remember Lester Roloff's song? He brought me to the banqueting table, and his banner over me is love. He brought me to the banqueting table, his banner over me is love. He just kept singing that over and over again. He knew how to write those good old-fashioned songs. Number one, we find that Christ offers us matchless rest. You notice what she says? I could sit down. You know, a lot of people don't know how to sit down. They don't know how to stop. They work feverishly all day long. They come home, they work feverishly at home, and then they can't sleep because they're worried about tomorrow. And there's something missing. And that's why I said that this life either brings joy or sorrow. Because if the one thing that's missing is time spent with Christ, nothing else will work. Everything else will lose its taste. It's like when you have a cold, and you can't smell, so nothing tastes very good, or you have your allergies, and everything's just, or when you're sick to your stomach, nothing tastes good. If you do not have the vital, vibrant communion intimately with Christ, everything else is for naught. You're living like an unsaved person, and there's no joy. So his matchless rest, as Christ promised in Matthew 11, 28 through 30, come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, I will give you rest. Take my yoke, learn from me. Every day, take his yoke. Take his yoke. Get into his word. There's nothing more wonderful than to stop and get into the word. And the Bible commends it in the morning, it commends it at night, it commends it at noon, it commends it 7 times a day. There's no perfect time. You have to pick it. And you know what? You have to discipline yourself to spend time in his matchless rest. Number 2, total security. Look what she says. She says, I have come to sit in the shadow or the shade. Have you ever thought about this? God is so awesome and so powerful and majestic, and he's hovering over us, and we're standing there and we see this gigantic shadow behind us. And no matter what comes at us, he's there. That's what it means when it says in Psalm 91, he who dwells in the secret place of the Most High abides under the shadow of the Almighty. Of the Almighty. You know what Almighty means? It means Almighty. I mean all powerful. Nothing beyond his power. And if we just learn the secret place, if we learn the total security that he provides through his love, there's nothing to fear. Number 3, there's overflowing joy. Notice what she says next. She says, and I sat under his shade with great delight. And what she's talking about is that we find in his presence that great delight. Psalm 16:11 you might want to write down. You will show me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand there are pleasures forevermore. I mean, this is just a taste, friends. It's going to get greater and greater. We will have an increased capacity to enjoy the delights of the Lord. Then there's an abundant supply, because she says also in verse 3 that his fruit, I'm sitting under this tree and the shadow of this tree, and I'm delighting and I'm being fed, and there's this abundant supply, fruit, as Christ said, and you might want to write down John 15:5. I'm the vine, you're the branches, he who abides in me and I in him bears much fruit. Apart from me you can do nothing. There's an abundant supply. There's the fruit of the Spirit. It's not us bearing fruit, it's the Spirit of God bearing fruit in the soil of our life. It is his fruit that is generated. It's not me trying to crank up some love for that hard-to-love person, a little more patience. His patience is present, but if I'm not using it, it's because of sinfully not allowing his Spirit to live out through me. Verse 4. Also, not only is there this matchless rest, total security, overflowing joy, abundant supply, he offers us individual guidance, personal guided tour. He brought me. He didn't send me. He didn't tell me. He brought me. He brought me to his banqueting table. And can you see this? I mean, get the picture again of this dark brown shepherdess who, met this fellow shepherd and fell in love, and then the fellow shepherd puts on his real clothes and turns out to be the king, and she's kind of not sure, and he brings her in to the most luxurious palace probably ever in the world because he was the wealthiest, most powerful king. Can you imagine how she was overcome? And he brought her into his banqueting table. And I wrote down Revelation 3:20, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If you hear my voice, if you open the door, I'll come and dine with you, and you can come and dine with me." He's invited us to come and dine with him. I hope that you'll come with an abundant, overflowing, total, matchless joy and security and rest and delight, and let him individually guide you. There's glorious fellowship, number 6. It's into his banqueting table or his banqueting house. Boy, it's glorious. I wrote this down, that this individual guide who brings us into his presence, brings us into the joy. He said, "At my right hand there are pleasures forevermore." Heaven is seen as a banquet. Do you ever notice what Christ said? He says, "And many will come in that day and sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob at the banquet in my kingdom." He talks about the glorious fellowship of banqueting, and he personally brings us. Here's the last one. If we do find his matchless rest, if we'll sit before him, it's a picture of salvation. If we'll learn the secret of his shadow and get security, if we'll let his Spirit bring overflowing joy and abundant supply, if we'll let him lead us, if we'll enjoy his glorious fellowship, listen, number 7, we will have consistent victory. This word banner, it says in verse 4, his banner over me was love. Well, we need to see that his banner over us is love. And his love brings us to consistent victory. And a banner speaks of conquest. When some place was conquered, they put up a banner and say it was conquered. It speaks of protection. The Romans would put up a banner and say, "This is a colony of Rome. You touch the colony, you've touched the empire. We will get you." Banner up. Also, the banner spoke of enlistment. They would put up banners and they'd say, "The empire is looking for a few good men. We'll give you a pound of salt a year," or whatever, and all that. But listen to what it says in 2 Corinthians 2:14. Last verse you might want to write down. "Now thanks be to God, who always leads us in triumph in Christ, and through us diffuses the fragrance of his knowledge in every place." The more you know about Jesus, the more you'll smell like spikenard, myrrh, and henna. And the more that you know Jesus, the more consistently we'll have victory in our lives. The more glorious will be our fellowship as we banquet with him. The more individually we'll experience his guiding as he shows us the path. The more abundant will be our supply of the fruit of the Spirit. The more overflowing will be our joyful delights in Christ. The more total will be our security of resting in his secret place. And the matchless wonder of knowing what it means to be still and to know that he's God.